The ceremony concluded with the announcement of new initiatives: a scholarship fund for young people who demonstrated extraordinary citizenship, expanded youth programs in law enforcement, and a new children's crisis hotline staffed by specially trained counselors. As people mingled afterward, enjoying refreshments and conversation, Chen noticed something remarkable. The boy was surrounded by other kids his age, not because of his award, but because they genuinely looked up to him. He had become a role model without ever seeking the spotlight. Mrs. Wilson had provided her famous cookies for the reception, and as Chen bit into one, he was transported back to that crucial day. "Who would thought," she said, appearing beside him with a fresh tray, "that cookies and kindness could help change so many lives?" The sun was setting outside, casting warm light through the town hall windows. Parents chatted while children played, the room filled with the sound of laughter and friendly conversation. This was more than a ceremony, it was a celebration of how one small voice could wake up an entire community. Later, as Chen walked to his car, he saw the boy and his parents heading home. The boy turned and waved, his award catching the last rays of sunlight. Chen waved back, remembering the scared child from a year ago. The transformation wasn't just in the boy, or the community, or the police department. It was in all of them, a reminder that the biggest changes often start with the smallest actions. The story of the Whisper and the Diner would be told for years to come, not just as a tale of rescue, but as proof that everyone, no matter how young or small, has the power to make a difference. In the end, it wasn't about the award or the ceremony, it was about how a single moment of bravery could light a spark that would continue to brighten lives for years to come. 1 year later, Officer Chen stood in the town hall auditorium, surrounded by proud families and fellow officers. The room buzzed with excitement as people filled every available seat. At the front, a small stage had been set up with a podium and several chairs. A banner hung above, reading Community Heroes Award Ceremony. The police chief stepped up to the microphone, his voice carrying through the packed room. "A year ago, our community witnessed something extraordinary. Not a dramatic chase or a big investigation with fancy technology. Instead, it started with something much simpler, a child's whisper in a diner booth." Chen's eyes found the boy in the audience, sitting between his parents. He'd grown taller over the past year, and the nervous, scared look in his eyes had been replaced with quiet confidence. He wore a Junior Police Program t-shirt, which he'd earned by completing the department's new Youth Safety Ambassador program. "Today," the chief continued, "we're here to celebrate not just one brave action, but the change it created. In the past year, our community has become stronger, safer, and more connected. We've seen how one person's courage can inspire others to speak up, to care, to make a difference." The screen behind the stage showed pictures from the past year, new safety programs in schools, community watch groups, the renovated park with better lighting, and the newly established Children's Advocacy Center. Each image told part of a larger story of positive change. Mrs. Wilson from the diner sat in the front row, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. Her diner had become a designated safe space for kids, one of many throughout the town. The corner booth where it all started now had a small plaque, its message simple but powerful: "Courage starts with a whisper." The chief gestured to a row of people seated on stage. "We have representatives here from 5 other communities who have adopted what we now call the Whisper Protocol, a new approach to helping children feel safe about speaking up. What started in our small town has spread, creating ripples of change that continue to grow." One by one, people shared stories of impact. A school principal talked about how students were more willing to report bullying. A counselor described how children felt more empowered to trust their instincts. A police trainer explained how departments across the state had updated their procedures for handling tips from young people. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. The boy walked onto the stage, his steps steady despite the crowd's attention. The chief handed him a special award, a crystal star embedded in a base that read, "For extraordinary courage and compassion." "Sometimes," the boy said into the microphone, his voice clear and strong, "being brave feels scary at first. But Officer Chen taught me that brave doesn't mean you're not afraid. It just means you do the right thing anyway." The audience broke into applause, but the ceremony wasn't finished. The rescued children and their families had sent video messages, their faces bright with renewed hope and happiness. Each one thanked the boy who had dared to speak up, though they still didn't know his identity. Their gratitude filled the room with emotional energy that brought tears to many eyes. Officer Chen watched as the boy returned to his seat, a award clutched carefully in his hands. He remembered that afternoon in the diner, how close the whole thing had come to never happening. If the boy hadn't noticed his kindness with Mr. Lee's lost dog, if Mrs. Wilson hadn't created such a welcoming space, if any small detail had been different. At the station's evening briefing, photos of the reunited families covered the bulletin board, each one a reminder of why they did this job. Officers who had participated in the rescue operation shared their experiences, not focusing on the tactical details, but on the moments that touched their hearts. The smiles of recognition when children saw their parents, the tight hugs that seemed to last forever, the tears of joy that flowed freely. One detail stuck with everyone: how the rescued children, once safe, had all asked about the boy who helped save them. They didn't know his name or face, but they understood that another kid, just like them, had been brave enough to speak up. It gave them hope and courage for their own recovery. As the day drew to a close, Chen drove past the local park. Kids were playing on the swings, parents watched from nearby benches, and everything looked normal. But something had changed in their town. There was a new awareness, a deeper understanding that sometimes the biggest heroes are the ones you least expect. Back at the station, a small package waited on Chen's desk. Inside was a hand-drawn card from the boy, showing a police car and what looked like a superhero wearing a police badge. The message inside, written in careful children's handwriting, simply read, "Thank you for listening." Chen pinned it to his bulletin board, right where he could see it every day, a reminder that sometimes all it takes to change the world is one person willing to listen and one brave soul willing to speak up. The morning after the rescue, Officer Chen sat at his desk, watching the sunrise through the station windows. His coffee had gone cold, forgotten as he read through messages from police departments across 3 states. The operation had triggered a chain reaction, leading to similar discoveries in other communities. What started with one boy's whisper was growing into something much bigger. In the break room, the TV quietly played the morning news. The reporter stood outside the Grey House, now surrounded by yellow police tape. In a stunning development, she announced, local police have uncovered a network that had been operating in plain sight. Thanks to a tip from an anonymous young source, multiple children have been rescued and reunited with their families. Chen smiled at the word anonymous. They had kept their promise to the boy. His identity remained protected. The story focused instead on the broader impact, how the discovery had led to similar investigations in neighboring towns, how it had exposed gaps in the system that needed fixing, and most importantly, how it showed that one person's courage could change everything. Down the hall, in the station's conference room, a team of social workers met with the rescued children's families. The room had been specially prepared to feel welcoming, comfortable chairs, soft lighting, and plenty of snacks and drinks. These meetings weren't about gathering evidence anymore. They were about helping families heal and rebuild. "My son hasn't stopped smiling since yesterday," one mother told the counselor, her voice thick with emotion. "He keeps saying he can't believe his friend was brave enough to tell someone. He wants to be brave like that too." The ripple effects spread through the community in unexpected ways. At the local elementary school, teachers noticed children speaking up more about things that bothered them. The school counselor reported that kids were showing more confidence in sharing their concerns, no matter how small. Mrs. Wilson's diner had become something of a symbol. People would point to the corner booth where it all started, and parents would tell their children about the importance of speaking up when something doesn't feel right. Mrs. Wilson herself had put up a small sign that read, "Heroes come in all sizes," subtle enough that only those who knew the story would understand its meaning. By afternoon, Officer Chen found himself back at that same booth, this time meeting with Lieutenant Wilson and the police chief. The diner's usual lunch crowd buzzed around them, unaware of the significance of their chosen spot. "The FBI just called," the chief said quietly, stirring his coffee. "This case has helped them connect dots they've been trying to piece together for months. The evidence we gathered is helping other departments build stronger cases. It's like dominoes falling, one right after another." But it wasn't just about solving crimes. The case had sparked important conversations throughout the community. Parents were talking more openly with their children about trust and safety. Schools were reviewing their procedures. Even local businesses were getting involved, offering their spaces as safe spots where kids could go if they ever felt scared or needed help. The boy's mother had called that morning, sharing how her son was doing. "He slept through the night for the first time in weeks," she told Chen. "When he woke up, he asked me if he could join the junior police program when he's older. He says he wants to help other kids like Officer Chen helped him." Later that day, Chen attended a meeting where city officials discussed new initiatives prompted by the case. They were planning to improve lighting in public areas, install more security cameras near schools, and create a special tip line just for kids. Sometimes it took a wake-up call to drive real change. Back at the station, the boy who started it all was still waiting with his mother. When Chen walked in, both looked up with questioning eyes. The officer knelt down to the boy's level, just as he had done in the diner. "Because of you," Chen said softly, "5 families will sleep better tonight. You did something incredibly brave, and I want you to know that you're a real hero." The boy's eyes welled up with tears, but this time they were tears of relief. Chen watched as mother and son hugged each other tightly. Sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest voices, he thought. This boy's courage had not only saved his friend, but had brought down an entire operation that had eluded police for months. As the night settled over the town, things slowly returned to normal. The gray house with the red door stood quiet and dark, its secrets finally exposed. Tomorrow, there would be news reports and official statements. But tonight was about reuniting families and celebrating the bravery of one small boy who dared to speak up. The operation's success would be measured not in arrests made or evidence collected, but in the smiles of children reunited with their families, and somewhere in town, a young boy could finally sleep peacefully, knowing he had made a difference in the world. The evening sky had turned a deep purple when Officer Chen pulled his unmarked car into position 3 houses down from their target. The street looked peaceful, porch lights turning on one by one, the sound of dogs barking in distant yards, and the gentle rustle of leaves in the spring breeze. Nobody would guess that every shadow held a highly trained officer waiting for the signal. "All units in position," crackled the quiet voice through his earpiece. Lieutenant Wilson was coordinating from the mobile command center, making sure every team member knew their role. They had gone over the plan countless times, but with children involved, there was zero room for error. The gray house with the red door stood quietly in the growing darkness. Flowers swayed gently in their beds, and warm light glowed from the upstairs windows. A white van sat in the driveway, exactly where the brave young boy had described it. The scene looked so normal that it made Chen's stomach turn, knowing what might lie behind those ordinary walls. "Remember," Lieutenant Wilson's voice came through again, "our priority is the children's safety. Team A will secure the main floor. Team B handles the basement. Medical units are standing by, and child welfare officers are ready to receive any kids we find." Chen checked his watch, 8:45 p.m. They had chosen this time carefully. Most neighbors would be inside, focused on evening routines and TV shows. The street would be quiet, giving them the cover they needed. The operation began with a soft knock at the front door. 2 officers, dressed as utility workers, claimed they were checking a reported gas leak. It was a simple but effective approach. Nobody wants to risk ignoring a gas leak. When the door opened, everything happened in swift, silent precision. Specialized teams moved through the house like shadows, each member knowing exactly where to go. Chen was part of Team B, heading for the basement. The boy's detailed description proved invaluable. The storage shelves hiding the entrance were exactly where he'd said they'd be. As they secured each room, Chen couldn't help but think about the young boy sitting in Joe's diner just hours ago, summoning all his courage to tell the truth. That small act of bravery had set this entire operation in motion. The basement door was reinforced. Another detail matching the boy's story. The team made quick work of the lock, using tools designed for silent entry. As they descended the stairs, Chen's training kicked in, pushing aside his emotions to focus on the task at hand. What they found in the basement would stay with Chen forever, not for its darkness, but for the light they brought to it. 5 children, just as the boy had described, all safe and now under police protection. Each child was immediately wrapped in warm blankets and led carefully upstairs, where caring medical staff waited to check them over. The rescue operation moved with gentle efficiency. Each child was treated with extra care, understanding that they'd been through enough trauma already. Social workers specially trained in helping children were there to provide immediate comfort and support. Outside, the neighborhood remained peacefully unaware of the history being made on their quiet street. The kids were led to waiting vans with tinted windows, protecting their privacy. They would be taken to a safe location where their families, who had been quietly contacted earlier, waited with open arms. All children secured, Chen reported quietly into his radio, watching the last van pull away. His heart felt both heavy and lifted, heavy from what these kids had endured, but lifted knowing they were finally safe. The evidence team moved in next, documenting everything with meticulous care. They would need every detail to make sure justice was served properly. But Chen's part was done. He had one more important stop to make. The boy's mother has agreed to let him help us identify potential victims from age-progressed photos, Detective Park said softly. She understands the importance of what her son has done. She's scared for him, but incredibly proud. Chen remembered the boy's words about the fake smiles, how even at his young age he could sense when something wasn't right. Children often saw things adults missed, noticed details that seemed insignificant but could crack a case wide open. As the sun began to set, casting an orange glow through the station windows, the team made their final preparations. Search warrants were ready, tactical teams were on standby, and medical personnel were positioned nearby. Years of training and experience had prepared them for this moment, but success would depend on perfect timing and coordination. Lieutenant Wilson gathered everyone for a final briefing. "Remember," she said, her voice firm but gentle, "this all started because a child was brave enough to speak up. Now it's our turn to be brave for all the children who couldn't speak up for themselves. Let's make sure we do this right." The room hummed with determined energy as officers checked their equipment one last time. Soon, they would move to end this nightmare. But for now, in this moment of preparation, they all shared a silent gratitude for the small boy, whose courage had set everything in motion. Back at the police station, the afternoon shift had transformed into a carefully coordinated operation. Officer Chen sat in the briefing room, surrounded by a team of dedicated officers and detectives. The boy was now safe with his mother in another room, where a trained child counselor was gently gathering more details about his experience. "The house has been under our radar for months," Lieutenant Wilson explained, pointing to a map displayed on the wall. Red pins marked previous complaints, creating a pattern that now made perfect sense. "We've had reports of unusual activities, but nothing concrete enough for action. Until today." Chen watched as his colleagues pored over satellite images of the property, studying every possible entry and exit point. The gray house with the red door looked so ordinary from above. Trimmed lawn, well-maintained flower beds, even a small vegetable garden in the back. It was amazing how normal something could appear while hiding such darkness within. "The boy's description matches 3 missing children cases from neighboring counties," Detective Park added, spreading photographs across the table. Each image showed a smiling child, taken before they disappeared. All of them vanished after school activities, just like his friend. Officer Thompson, who had helped at the diner, stepped forward with his notes. "According to our young witness, there's a basement entrance hidden behind some storage shelves. He noticed it during a community gathering at the house last month. The owner hosts neighborhood events regularly, probably to avoid suspicion." The room fell quiet as everyone absorbed this information. Chen thought about the boy's trembling hands as he'd shared his secret, how much courage it must have taken to speak up. Sometimes the smallest voices could unlock the biggest cases. "We've confirmed activity in the house," a surveillance officer reported, checking his tablet. "Multiple heat signatures in the basement area. The owner's car is currently parked in the driveway, and we've observed another individual making regular deliveries using a white van, just as the boy described." Detective Park pulled up property records on her computer. "The house was purchased 5 years ago through a shell company. We've traced it back to a network of similar properties across 3 states. This could be bigger than we initially thought." Chen felt a mix of emotions as he looked at the evidence wall growing larger by the minute. Pride in the brave boy who had trusted him enough to share his secret. Determination to help the trapped children. And hope that they could end this nightmare for multiple families. The owner maintains a respected position in the community, Officer Lopez noted, scrolling through local news articles. Youth soccer coach, regular volunteer at community events, even won a Good Neighbor Award last year. It's the perfect cover, hiding in plain sight while building trust with local families. The investigation team had set up a command center in a vacant office, walls covered with maps, timelines, and photographs. Every piece of information, no matter how small, could be crucial. They worked methodically, connecting dots that had seemed unrelated before the boy's revelation. Outside the station, life continued as normal. Parents picked up their children from school, people walked their dogs, and the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the town square. Nobody knew that just a few blocks away, a team of dedicated officers was preparing for one of the most important operations in their careers. "Social Services is standing by," Lieutenant Wilson announced, ending a phone call. "They've arranged safe houses and support services for any children we find. Medical teams are also on alert, ready to provide immediate care if needed." Chen thought about Mrs. Wilson from the diner, how she had created a safe space with nothing more than cookies and kindness. Sometimes the smallest actions could make the biggest difference in a child's life. He made a mental note to thank her properly once this was all over. The team reviewed their tactical plan again. Every detail had to be perfect. They couldn't risk anyone escaping or destroying evidence. More importantly, they had to ensure the safety of any children they might find. Chen watched as the boy slowly began to open up more to Thompson, answering questions disguised as casual conversation. Each response provided crucial information that was being quietly relayed to the growing team of officers gathering nearby. The boy's bravery continued to amaze Chen. How this small child had carried such a heavy secret and found the courage to share it. Outside the diner, more plainclothes officers had arrived in unmarked cars, strategically parking in different locations. Detective Lead from the Child Protection Unit was setting up a mobile command center in a nearby bookstore, coordinating with social services and preparing for what might become one of the largest rescue operations in their small town's history. But inside the diner, in that corner booth, time seemed to move at its own pace. The focus remained on making sure the brave young boy felt safe and understood that he had done the right thing. Sometimes the biggest acts of courage come in the smallest packages, Chen thought, watching as the boy finally reached for a French fry, his shoulders noticeably more relaxed than when he'd first walked in. The afternoon continued to unfold, a delicate balance of careful planning and gentle conversation. Every officer involved knew that what happened next would need to be handled perfectly. But for now, in Joe's diner, there was just a boy, some caring officers, and Mrs. Wilson's endless supply of comfort food, proof that sometimes the biggest changes start in the smallest, most ordinary places. Officer Chen kept his movements casual as he reached for his radio, making sure to maintain a friendly smile. He didn't want to frighten the boy, who was now slowly nibbling at the edges of his cookie. Years of training had taught him that the next few minutes would be crucial. He needed to alert his colleagues without creating any panic in the diner. "Dispatch, this is Officer Chen." He spoke quietly into his radio, keeping his tone light as if he was making a routine check-in. "I'm at Joe's Diner on Main Street. Could you send Officers Thompson and Rodriguez for a quick consultation? Code Yellow 7. The code, known to every officer in the department, meant sensitive situation involving a minor, immediate but discreet response needed. The boy watched him with curious eyes, still holding his cookie. "Are more police officers coming?" he asked, his voice carrying a mix of worry and hope. Chen nodded reassuringly. "Just a couple of my friends who help kids like you. They're very nice people. While we wait, would you like to hear about the time I helped rescue a family of ducks that got stuck in the town fountain?" The boy's eyes lit up slightly, and Chen launched into the story, describing how the mother duck had led her ducklings right into the middle of the town square. His animated storytelling drew a genuine smile from the boy, exactly what Chen wanted, to keep him calm and distracted. Within minutes, a plain black car pulled up outside the diner. To anyone watching, it looked like just another vehicle arriving for lunch. Officer Thompson, wearing civilian clothes, walked in and sat at the counter, ordering coffee like any other customer. Officer Rodriguez, also in plain clothes, chose a booth near the door, pulled out a newspaper, and began to read. Mrs. Wilson, bless her heart, picked up on the situation immediately. She moved around the diner with practiced ease, filling coffee cups and taking orders, creating a bubble of normality around what was becoming an increasingly delicate operation. Chen continued his duck story, watching as the boy relaxed slightly in his presence. "And you know what?" he added with a gentle smile. "Those ducklings were scared at first, just like you might be feeling right now. But they trusted us to help them, and that's exactly what we did." The boy nodded, understanding the deeper meaning in the simple story. "What happens now?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Well," Chen replied, choosing his words carefully, "first, we're going to make sure you're safe. My friends and I, that's our most important job. Then we're going to help your friend and the other kids too. But we need to be very careful and smart about it, just like when we helped those ducks. Sometimes helping people is like solving a puzzle. We need to put all the pieces together in just the right way." Officer Thompson casually made his way to their booth, coffee cup in hand. "Hey, David," he said cheerfully, as if running into an old friend. "Mind if I join you?" Chen gestured to the empty seat beside him, maintaining the casual atmosphere. "This is my friend, Officer Thompson," he explained to the boy. "He's really good at helping kids and their families." Thompson smiled warmly at the boy, pulling out what looked like a regular cell phone but was actually a specialized device for recording sensitive statements. "I hear you like stories about helping animals," he said, keeping his voice gentle and friendly. "Did Officer Chen tell you about the time we rescued a lost puppy that had wandered into the high school during graduation?" The boy shook his head, seeming interested despite his nervousness. As Thompson began telling the story, Officer Rodriguez quietly coordinated with other units via text, setting up surveillance around the gray house with the red door. Everything had to be handled with extreme care. One wrong move could put other children at risk. Mrs. Wilson appeared again, this time with a plate of fresh fries. "On the house," she said with a warm smile, placing them in the middle of the table. "Growing boys need their strength." Her eyes met Chen's briefly, conveying her understanding of the situation and her desire to help. The afternoon sun had shifted, casting longer shadows through the diner windows. At other tables, customers came and went, completely unaware of the delicate operation unfolding in their midst. To them, it just looked like two friendly officers chatting with a local kid over fries and cookies. "Nobody will know," Chen promised firmly. "Right now, you and I are just having cookies at the diner. That's all anyone needs to know." He glanced at Mrs. Wilson, who was watching them with concern from behind the counter. "In fact, how about we get you another cookie while we wait for your mom to pick you up?" The boy's eyes widened slightly. "But I didn't tell you how to call my mom." Chen smiled gently. "That's okay. I'm going to have a friend help us with that. Right now, the most important thing is that you're safe here with me." He reached slowly for his radio, keeping his movements casual. He knew that what would happen next would need to be handled with extreme care, but for now, his priority was keeping this brave young boy calm and protected. The afternoon sun continued to stream through the diner windows, casting long shadows across their booth. To anyone passing by, they might have looked like an officer having a friendly chat with a local kid. But in that moment, as Chen prepared to make the call that would set massive wheels in motion, he knew that this small boy's courage was about to change many lives forever. The boy glanced over his shoulder one last time, before leaning in so close that Officer Chen could smell the sweet scent of strawberry juice on his breath. His small voice trembled as he began to speak, each word carefully chosen as if he rehearsed them in his head 100 times. "There are other kids," he whispered, his words barely audible above the gentle clatter of plates and murmured conversations filling the diner. "They're scared, just like me. But they told me not to tell anyone, especially not the police." Officer Chen felt his coffee turn cold in his stomach. 20 years on the force had taught him to expect anything, but something in the boy's voice made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. He kept his face calm, though, knowing that his reaction could either encourage or frighten the child into silence. "You're doing the right thing," Chen assured him softly, sliding his notepad slightly under his half-eaten sandwich to avoid drawing attention. "Can you tell me more about these other kids?" The boy's fingers played nervously with the zipper of his backpack. "There's this house," he continued, his eyes fixed on the table. "It looks normal from outside, like any other house, but inside..." He paused, swallowing hard. "Inside, there's a door that's always locked. I heard crying behind it once when I was there." Mrs. Wilson passed by their booth again, this time placing a chocolate chip cookie in front of the boy. She'd been a waitress long enough to know when something serious was happening, and her motherly instincts told her to create a shield of normalcy around the pair. "Thank you," Chen mouthed to her as she walked away. To the boy, he asked, "How do you know about this house?" "My friend from school." The boy started, then corrected himself. "Well, he used to be at my school. He disappeared 3 weeks ago. But yesterday, I saw him through a window of that house. He looked different, scared. He saw me too, but he put his finger to his lips, like this." The boy demonstrated the universal quiet gesture, his small finger pressing against his trembling lips. Officer Chen's mind was already racing through protocols and procedures, but he kept his voice steady and gentle. "You're being very brave right now. Can you remember where this house is?" The boy nodded slowly, breaking off a tiny piece of the cookie but not eating it. "It's the big gray house on Pine Street, the one with the red door and lots of flowers in the front. There's always a white van in the driveway." He paused, crumbling the cookie piece between his fingers. "The man who lives there, he seems nice to everyone. He even helped coach our soccer team once. But his smile, it's not real. It's like when my mom makes me smile for pictures when I don't want to." Chen felt his pulse quicken. He knew exactly which house the boy was describing. There had been several calls about suspicious activities there over the past few months, but never enough evidence to warrant a full investigation. Now, hearing this child's account, all those little pieces were starting to form a disturbing picture. "Can you tell me one more thing?" Chen asked, noticing how the boy's eyes kept darting to the diner's entrance. "How did you know to come find me here?" The boy's voice got even quieter. "I saw you here before when I was with my mom. And yesterday, when I saw my friend in that window, I remembered how you helped old Mr. Lee find his lost dog last summer. You were nice to him, even though everyone else just laughed at him for losing his dog again." A ghost of a smile crossed the boy's face. "I thought maybe you'd be nice enough to help my friend too." That simple statement, delivered with such pure trust, made Chen's throat tight. He was a child who had noticed an act of kindness months ago and held onto it like a lifeline, waiting for the right moment to ask for help himself. "What you've done today is incredible," Chen said, meaning every word. "But I need you to know something very important. What you've told me, about the house, about your friend, about everything, I'm going to have to tell other police officers. We need help to make sure all the kids are safe. Is that okay?" The boy's fingers finally stopped fidgeting with the cookie crumbs. He sat up a little straighter, as if sharing his secret had lifted a heavy weight from his small shoulders. "Will you make sure nobody knows it was me who told?" "The man at the house," he said, "if anyone ever told." "You're very brave for coming to talk to me," David said quietly, matching the boy's whispered tone. "And I want you to know that you're safe here. Nothing bad is going to happen to you. My job is to protect people, especially brave kids like you who ask for help when they need it." The boy's shoulders relaxed just a fraction more, and he took a shaky breath. Everything about his demeanor told David that what was coming next would change this ordinary Wednesday into something very different. The lunch crowd continued their meals, the sun kept streaming through the windows, and Mrs. Wilson's coffee pot kept making its rounds. But in that corner booth, time seemed to stand still as the boy gathered his courage to speak. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows of Joe's diner, casting warm patches of light across the checkered floor tiles. Officer David Chen sat in his usual corner booth, enjoying what he thought would be just another quiet lunch break. The familiar smell of coffee and grilled sandwiches filled the air, while the gentle hum of conversations and clinking plates created that comfort only small-town diners seemed to have. David had been coming to this diner for the past 5 years of his service. The owner, Mrs. Wilson, a grandmother figure to half the town, always made sure his coffee cup stayed full. She understood that being a cop meant staying alert, even during lunch breaks. "Can't catch bad guys on an empty stomach," she'd often say with a warm smile while refilling his cup. That Wednesday afternoon felt different somehow. Maybe it was the unusual spring chill in the air, or perhaps it was just one of those days when something felt off, but you couldn't quite put your finger on it. David was halfway through his turkey club sandwich when the little bell above the door chimed. At first, he didn't look up. The lunch rush meant that bell was chiming every few minutes. But when several seconds passed without the usual sound of footsteps or chatter, his instincts kicked in. He glanced toward the entrance, and there stood a small boy, probably no more than 7 years old, wearing a blue backpack that seemed too big for his small frame. The boy's presence immediately set off alarm bells in David's mind. It wasn't normal to see a child this young alone during school hours. The boy's clothes were clean and his hair was neatly combed, but something about his body language spoke of distress. His small hands were clutching the straps of his backpack so tightly that his knuckles had turned white. David watched as the child's eyes scanned the diner, moving from table to table until they locked onto his police uniform. The boy's shoulders seemed to relax just slightly, but his face remained tense. Years of experience had taught David to read people, and everything about this kid screamed that something was wrong. Mrs. Wilson had noticed too. She started moving toward the boy with that grandmother's concern written all over her face, but the child was already making his way directly to David's booth. His steps were hesitant but determined, like someone who had practiced being brave. "Hi there, buddy," David said softly, pushing his plate aside to give the boy his full attention. He kept his voice gentle and his posture relaxed, using the same approach that had helped him connect with countless scared kids over the years. "Are you hungry? Mrs. Wilson makes the best chocolate chip cookies in town." The boy shook his head slightly. He was standing just at the edge of the booth now, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. His eyes kept darting to the diner's windows and back to David's face. Something about that nervous glancing made David's cop instincts sharpen even more. "Would you like to sit down?" David asked, gesturing to the empty seat across from him. The boy nodded and slipped into the booth, his backpack still firmly attached to his shoulders. Up close, David could see the slight tremor in the child's hands and the way he kept biting his lower lip. David had learned early in his career that sometimes the best thing you can do is simply wait. So he sat quietly, keeping his body language open and non-threatening, giving the boy time to find his voice. The diner's usual lunch crowd continued their meals around them, unaware of the tension building at the corner booth. Mrs. Wilson appeared with a glass of water, placing it gently in front of the boy. She'd been running this diner long enough to read situations too, and she moved away without asking any questions. The boy wrapped his small hands around the glass but didn't drink. Finally, after what felt like an eternity but was probably only a minute or two, the boy leaned forward slightly. His voice was barely above a whisper when he spoke, "Are you really a police officer?" David nodded, keeping his expression friendly but professional. "Yes, I am. My name is Officer Chen. I help people in our town when they're in trouble or need assistance." The boy's eyes welled up with tears, but he blinked them back quickly. He glanced around one more time before leaning even closer across the table. I need to tell you something important," he whispered, his voice shaking. "But I'm not supposed to tell anyone. They said bad things would happen if I did." David felt his heart rate quicken, but years of training kept his exterior calm. He knew this moment was crucial. Whatever this child was about to say could be extremely serious, and how he handled the next few minutes could make all the difference.